Welcome back in. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head, Wes Mitchell, and Chris Clark along with you on this Thursday morning. Quick reminder, coming up on Saturday before the game between Clemson and South Carolina out at Segra Park, going to have the Battle of Bull Street Street Party going on out there. You have an opportunity to win some tickets to attend that coming up today on the postgame show from 3 until 6. Be tuned in, listening to Jay and Elijah for your chance to win, again, for the Battle of Bull Street Party out at Segra coming up on Saturday. We now head out to Love Chevrolet phone lines. Welcome back in Stuart Lake, who, of course, is on the call for the Gamecock baseball broadcast. Stuart, first of all, thank you so much for taking a little bit of your time this morning. We last talked to you right before the season started a couple of weeks ago. Now that you've seen a 9-game sample size of the South Carolina team, what stands out the most to you out of what you've seen so far?
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me on. It's been the biggest thing I think we talked about that day. It's still trying to figure out our pitching staff, but I sure think we're seeing a lot of positive things from them. That's been the biggest part to me as I started to kind of crunch the numbers, if you will, yesterday between us and Clemson. Our pitching numbers keep jumping out. I mean, a 2.4, ERA, what we're doing, I feel, out of the bullpen with so many arms is just, it's really been a good 9 games that's kind of started getting a feel for our pitching staff.
Hey, Coach, it's Wes. Appreciate you doing this again, man. I'm curious, yes, as a guy who you're just an all-around baseball guy. You've seen this rivalry from a fan perspective, now an analyst perspective, from a coach perspective. What does South Carolina versus Clemson baseball, when these two teams square off every year, what does this rivalry mean to you?
Well, it means a lot to me. I grew up a Gamecock fan, so I've been kind of hanging on these rivalries since I can ever remember. I got to go through it 9 times as a coach, and I remember the pressure of that. I was telling just a friend of mine yesterday, when this weekend ends on Sunday, win or lose, you're exhausted. And it's just the stress. There's no stress compared to this weekend till you get to your regionals. So this is what we always, and Coach Tanner was so great at never minimizing this series to our guys. And I thought that was always huge. This means a lot. Don't try to act like it's just another game. Let's treat this like a regional. When the weekend's over, let's evaluate how we handle that pressure and move on from there. But it's just a really exciting weekend for a coach. I know the players. It's just a buzz in the air that you haven't had, through 9 games, and that's what's exciting about it.
I was talking with our last guest, John Blau, who covers Clemson, Stuart, about last hour, about kind of the similarities between these two teams, and that through the first several games of the season, they both handled business with the exception of one game, right, where they committed errors, just didn't play well, things kind of got away. But what do you see from this year's Clemson team and your scouting, from what you've heard, from what you've observed, as far as just their overall team identity?
Well, honestly, up until probably Wednesday, I had just kept up with Clemson through scores. And then you start putting them side by side, and some numbers really jump out. When you start seeing their team batting average 330, 17 home runs, you compare that back over to a Gamecocks offense that's been putting up averaging almost double digits, 285 batting average and only 11 home runs. So those two jumped out at me. They're doing very well getting on base at 441, but we're doing unbelievable at 474. And then the runs, which are always crucial, obviously, 84 Gamecocks, 69 Clemson. So I think you're going to see a very similar type team. They've got Cam Canarello, who's 517 with his 576, and then you go, okay, we can do you a little better. We got Brewer with 519 and 622 on base. So it's really going to be cool to watch these two teams match up this weekend.
Again, talking to Stuart Lake from the Gamecocks Radio Network. You mentioned Clemson's offense so far this season. They're top 10 in all of college baseball when it comes to those home runs with 17. And looking at South Carolina's pitching, with the exception of that one game against Belmont, been very efficient, holding most of their opponents in check. How do you feel like they're going to stack up against a team that can hit for power like Clemson can this weekend?
Well, this is one of those cases, and I can say it when I'm not coaching, weather might be an issue. Let's see what this weather brings. I'm going to tell you right now, no one likes playing in cold weather. I don't care how tough you want to be, and mentally tough is part of it. But if it's a really cold, kind of wet night on Friday night, I think that changes both offenses. But I feel like with the South Carolina pitching staff, they do a thing that I enjoy the most. I told y'all this before the season started. Matt Williams is so much about let's throw strikes. if we throw strikes, we got a chance to get them to hit our defense. And if they hit it to our defense, we're fielding right now 968. You got a pretty good chance you're going to avoid those big innings. And that's what they're going to have to do. And that's what Clemson, I know Clemson's sitting looking at Gamecock stats going, they've been walked 86 times, which, by the way, leads the country, and hit 18 times. So they're going to be coming in here really trying to eliminate those extra bases as well.
Coach, you started off talking about the South Carolina pitching staff. I wanted to ask you about a couple of guys in particular. I think we all, if you've followed enough baseball, whenever you hear a guy's having a little arm issue going into a year, even when they say, hey, it's going to be a week, it's going to be a couple weeks, you're kind of secretly a little bit worried, I think, as a fan. But for Kimball and then, of course, Matthew Becker, man, both those guys I feel like have just been honestly fantastic, like maybe exceeding expectations so far. What do you think that means for, I would even go as far as to say, the ultimate upside of this team this year if those two guys can keep building on what they've done so far this year?
No, I think it could be huge. I mean, the great thing about Becker and Kimball was unrelated to the arm. Both are that lat muscle, and both have, and really what we've seen, haven't shown any issues with it. And I ate breakfast with coaches on Monday, and I said, man, I love Roman on Sunday because he brings energy. Mm-hmm. It is fun to watch a Sunday starter just go out and just look like he's enjoying being out there, because there's so many Sunday games that decide the series. And I've really enjoyed what he's brought to the table. And then I'm sure the coaches are still trying to figure out where Matthew Becker is going to fit in. But, boy, when he comes in, you love it when he's in. So if that's a starter, if that's your left-handed guy at the bullpen, and then you got Ty Good, we haven't even talked about yet. I think he's got probably a pitch in his curveball that's as equalizer as Chris Beach's changeup. So I'm really excited for Gamecock pitching staff of what's starting to develop, not just on the starter side, but out of the bullpen, as you mentioned.
Stuart, something else we know about this Clemson team is that Cam Canarella, their outstanding outfielder, I think, is he hitting about 500 to start the season?
Yeah.
And leading off for them. He really seems to be their tone setter. How important, in your opinion, is it going to be to kind of control him and not let him get things started for the Tigers?
Well, I think it's really going to be important. I just don't know how well you can control him in a sense. 517. That's incredible batting average right now. He's already got 15 hits. The biggest thing with Cam is he's not a true base runner. I mean, when you look at the stats, he's really only 0 for 1 right now on the year, and you go back to last year, now he's 24 for 29 last year, but it's just the energy. If you can have him jogging back to the dugout at the start games, the Gamecocks, you got to feel much better, because he is no doubt their spark plug, and it just has led. He's a big reason they're hitting 330 as a team, hitting 517.
Coach, you've had the opportunity to be a part of this rivalry, as you mentioned, for many, many years. Do you have a definitive favorite moment that stands out to you when these two teams have gotten together?
Well, I do. I was part of that 2002 coaching staff, and at the time, we didn't have the social media that we do now. We didn't really comprehend what was going on back here when we were in Omaha. And my brother, Stephen, was working for the governor at the time and kept calling me and saying, hey, we're giving days off, and it's just still a moment in my life. And then coming back, Coach Tanner mentioned it in a staff meeting the other day. We come back here, which is a memory that you hardly ever hear, but we came back to Sarge Fry after the World Series. We had lost to Texas in the national championship game. We probably had 2,500 fans meet us here because we had beaten Clemson twice in Omaha. So 20 years later, it's hard to top that one, and then they did it again in 2010. So that's probably my most moment. But Coach Tanner used to have a cool saying to us when we go to Clemson, let's let them play their song one time at the beginning of the game, and then I don't want to hear it again. So when we knew we got on the bus and hadn't heard that song too many times, we knew we'd probably had a pretty good day up there.
Yeah, Coach, final thing here. What is the biggest key for South Carolina to not be hearing that song much this weekend?
I think it's going to come down to pitching again, as it always does. Throwing strikes. It's going to be a bunch of guys. This is new to them. You know, Roman Kimball, I think, is a special dude. He'll be the guy if the weather dictates he pitches on Sunday. Now, that's the thing. None of us know what's going to happen tomorrow night. they've kind of both said we're going to stay with the same rotation, which would put Roman pitching on Sunday at Clemson. Who knows, if you don't get a game in and you just play a 2-game series, that could change. But I just think it'll be how can we handle the nerves of pitching for the first time. This will be the first road game for both teams. Both teams have played all their games at home. So just it's going to be, to me, who can minimize walks, who can minimize those fielding errors, and then who can take advantage of offensive opportunities they get.
Well, Coach, hopefully we can dodge the bad weather this weekend. We're talking about South Carolina taking the series once again when it's all said and done. Appreciate your time as always, Coach.
I enjoy it. Thank you, guys.